Well, hi there. This is Truth Seeker. I know it's been a little while since I made a video. I don't know how much time I've got. My daughter's on her way over for a visit. My wife is out taking care of babysitting a cat. So I may not have a whole lot of time to talk about things. But it's been busy. I just haven't had the time. We've been doing a lot of work on the house. Contractors. We're going to be doing the bathroom next. We just had most of our windows replaced, and we're getting the house ready for sale. That stage in my life where I'm starting to think about those things. Another year, 2 years, maybe is the most we'll be here. My last video had to do with shunning. I still intend to finish that off. I didn't really get to some of the most major points that I'd like to make on the topic. So we'll revisit that at some point, but not today. Instead, I want to talk about some interaction that I had with a relative of mine, a first cousin. I've mentioned probably numerous times before that most of my family are Bible students, have been. My family had been drawn into the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society back in its early days when its founder was still alive, Charles Taze Russell. And it just passed on generation to generation. And now there are a couple of us that have had the, I would say, courage to question our faith. I have a cousin who has squarely confronted his upbringing and faith in the faith, and he and I can dialogue pretty well over this, but not this particular cousin. Now, this particular cousin is pretty well renowned within the Bible student movement as being a Bible student intellectual. He's really big into chronology. He's invited to speak all over the world at Bible student conventions. He's spoken at the International Bible Students Convention. He has spoken at the Bible Students General Convention. And the Bible students held their general convention this past July. I believe it was July 20th through 25th. It's usually a 6-day affair, and this year they switched the venue. They held it at Moscow, Idaho, in the University of Idaho. I know my cousin was there. I took some sneak peeks into the convention, but not many, not as many as in the past. But basically, as my other cousin that I reached out to 2 days ago said, it's the same old. And he and I have identical perspectives on the truth, which Bible students had first nibs on the term the truth, and it just passed on to Jehovah's Witnesses. Um, I don't know what compelled my cousin to reach out to me. We have never been very close. I've never been intellectual enough for him. I um, I never really got into the types of in-depth Bible study that he likes to make things very complicated, very convoluted, very extremely detailed oriented person. And his interest is really in Bible chronology. He's even held seminars on the topic. He has taken Russell's chronology, the dates and the basis for the dates of 1874 and 1878 and 1914, and then he's not only just extrapolated upon them but built on them another infrastructure of chronology that has come out where he's come out with another projection. Now this is a time worn legacy of the Bible students coming up with dates and projecting dates for when the kingdom will begin. And Bible students have had 1914, which most XJWs and Bible students, Bible students, former and active, hold very closely to this. Former Bible students tend to reject it. Although I don't think there are as many ex-Bible students in the world as there are ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. Certainly that has to do with the huge difference in size between the two organizations. But also, I think that the Bible students managed to have a possibly, I don't know, because Bible students don't retain statistics, a higher retention rate. I think that they work harder on their kids, and because for one thing, there isn't so many. Their message, their witnessing effort, isn't bringing in people by the droves, and the families tend to focus more on their family members. What parent wouldn't want their child to be part of the 144,000? So they take special attention to their own children. So I think there is a higher retention rate through indoctrination. And there is the typical application of guilt and shame and a sense of your sense of who you are. It's not only just self-esteem, but your whole sense of who you are. Your self-identity is tremendously tied in to the Bible students' culture, to its doctrines, and so your whole sense of who you are and your self-worth within the system is all dependent on the whether or not you adhere to the teachings of Charles Russell. And so the only reason anybody would leave the Bible students would be if they were lured in by the flesh, weaknesses of the flesh, or the wiles of the devil, or the material enticement of the world. And these are the three great enemies of the Bible students. And so they lead a very, very insular life. And they live in the world, but they are not of it. So the Bible students are kind of a unique little group when you deal with them, because there aren't too many, especially who will be listening. And if somebody leaves, like I did, it's more of a rarity. I don't think that there are too many young people who really question the faith. But I've been out of action for so long, it's hard for me to gauge, because I really don't. I haven't been to a Bible student meeting since probably around 2004. But I was in my 50s. It was the greater part of my life that was spent within the movement. And I don't think there's been a heck of a lot of change in the culture. And basically because the obvious thing is that you can't see God, you can't talk to God, you can't interact with him, even though you can attribute all kinds of things to God. oh, that was a miracle that that happened just so just the way it did, and I should learn either an admonition or it was a blessing or God saved me from some terrible travesty. But there's always that attribution that God. Even with absolutely no evidence, there's that attribution that God was involved in some manner to what event may have taken place in a person's life. But I was very surprised because the last time I talked with this particular cousin was probably about 2 years ago. When I say talk, I mean dialogue on internet, email in particular. And I felt uncomfortable with the continual referral of me as brother so and so. And my cousin, I mean, even though we were first cousins, he wouldn't address me by my first name. I mean, there was this uh, let me artificial formality of calling me brother, and I just didn't I didn't want to be I just didn't want to let him go on continuing to act as if I were his brother in the truth. So I outed myself and I wrote back saying that I am an atheist. And he wrote back and he threw out some names and he did the typical apologist sort of thing, even though the Bible students must be approached a little differently because they believe everybody's wrong. They believe they're the only ones that are begotten of the Spirit that have the truth. That there are no other sects, that philosophies or sects or anything that hasn't been influenced by Satan. So it's difficult to put out a compelling argument to a Bible student because you're just not begotten of the Holy Spirit and you simply don't understand. I mean, so how do you argue against that? That's a very difficult position to argue against. So they're not only an insular group, but they're also very close to any other outside influence that may be let's say a good argument against their position. You have to argue a little differently with your position as an atheist to the Bible with the Bible students. So it was a little surprising to me because I figured, well, that was that, and my cousin acknowledged that I am an atheist, and then live and let live. And so I was a little surprised that almost immediately after the General Convention, I found 3 emails in my inbox. And one of them was Atheism Without Explanations. And there was a link to it to a Prager U video. Now, I'm aware of Dennis Prager, and quite frankly, Dennis Prager is if you could find a diametrically opposed position on almost everything, it's Dennis Prager from my point of view. And I admit I have a tendency towards liberalism and humanism. And Prager, it's an unusual situation because Prager is from a pretty orthodox Jewish heritage, and he promotes not only a conservative political agenda, but also a conservative, more of a evangelical Christian perspective. He supports a Christian agenda, and so his videos are both political and religious in nature, in terms of making an apology for the Christian beliefs. So I did a little digging into this Prager University because, frankly, I'd never heard of it. And first off, it's not a university. It is founded by Dennis Prager, but it's more of a platform, really just a media platform for projecting his conservative agenda. No one can go to school there. You can't register. You can't get a degree. It's not even a diploma mill. So I really failed to understand how it could be considered a university, except that they want it's a disingenuous allusion to providing credibility to what's being said, to what's being promoted in these videos. And there are quite a number of these videos. Recently, interesting that the timing was such. Interestingly, Seth Andrews interviewed Brian Dalton, and Brian Dalton does he's an interesting fella. He does a skit called Mr. Deity, and it's it's actually pretty interesting. And now he does something called the Mister. Ah, my dear wife is here, and so I am going to have to be cutting this short. But what's interesting about Brian Dalton is that he's doing a rebut to these PragerU videos. But the interesting thing about this particular video is that it's unusual. First, it's unusual for a Bible student to reach out to, let's say, a worldly religious, worldly religious sector who are influenced by Satan, to promote or to make an argument, to support an argument for something. So I found that a little unusual, and then second, the video was a 6-minute video. It was prefaced by an introduction that said "atheism without explanations," and it went on to explain that it is incumbent upon atheists to provide the defense for their position. What the apologists, the Christian apologists, failed to realize, however, is that atheism is not a positive assertion. It's not a statement in which one is making a claim to that something is. If you're looking at it from a scientific perspective, atheism is the null hypothesis. It is simply a statement that says somebody out there claims there is a God. They've provided evidence. The evidence is the Bible or whatever miracles they think that may have occurred. And we do not, us atheists, do not believe that that is sufficient evidence to establish that God indeed exists. So basically, this is my sweetheart. Well, I'm gonna make it a short video. She's been so tremendous in supporting me. I owe so much to her. But anyway, I love her to death. But anyway, it's the null hypothesis, basically. And it is incumbent upon the people that make the claim that something is to provide the evidence that that thing is. So it is really flipped upside down according to the Christians. They haven't flipped upside down. The atheists have nothing to prove. It's the Christians that have to prove positively what they're what they're asserting, what they're claiming. So they got that wrong. And then they entitled it Christian or Atheism Without Explanations. And then they went into the fine tuning of the universe argument. Well, I find that kind of uh, really kind of hypocritical. First, I think I want to refer everybody to Douglas Adams. If you haven't seen Douglas Adams' video, do a little YouTube search for the Sentient Puddle, and it just right there in a nutshell. It's only about a minute long, maybe 2 minutes long, and Douglas Adams goes through through a dialogue where a puddle becomes sentient, and he finds the world around him fits him quite neatly, and he thinks that the world is made for him. And as the puddle evaporates away, he's pondering all this while all the intricacies of how this world so neatly fits him. And as he evaporates away to nothing, he still has this concept, this idea that the world and the universe was made for him. And the danger to that thinking, there are a lot of dangers to that thinking, but one of the key dangers is that we don't believe that it is of necessity to take care of our environment. And that was one of the key points that Adams was making in that video. And it's true. The Christians believe that this is a throwaway world. That in Genesis, that God ordained Adam to have dominion over the fish of the sea and the fowl of the air and over the every creeping creature that creepeth upon the earth. And this is a fallacy that humankind is somehow this is something that's been given to humans to do whatever they want to do with, and we see that the wonders of evolution and the intricate ecologies that evolution has adapted to, and we're destroying all of this because we believe that it's our right to exploit the resources of the world. But this is not a key argument that even though I'm an environmental engineer and I care about such things, I think it's more important to ponder whether or not there is indeed a God. And this concept of this fine tuning argument, really is a very, very narrow minded point of view. First off, this PragerU video used some guy, as Douglas Adams says in his trilogy, Hitchhiker's Guide. He's just this guy. There's this guy that he's nobody of note. He's not a cosmologist. He's not someone who can speak on the subject as an expert, and he's providing this cosmological fine-tuning argument about the strong force and how that the strong force had to be just so in order for the nuclear fusion process to work in such a way that the sun is a life-giving source for us and so on. What they fail to mention is that the sun has limited fuel. One of the things, and this is especially true to Bible students, because I know there are a lot of Christian faiths, and many of them believe that the earth is just a way station for making angels. And some believe that this is a testing ground for people to become gods in their own right, the Mormon religion, where they become gods of their own universe that they create later on. But the Bible students, on the other hand, and Jehovah's Witnesses also believe this, is that the earth was made for human beings and that God intended it to be made forever, to be the home of humanity forever. Now, the key aspect to this whole thing is forever. When you talk about forever, you got lots and lots and lots of problems. And the problems dealing with forever are not trivial. And so this fine tuning argument is really fallacious. Um, yes, it appears that certain constants are indeed quite precise, and that physics of this world could be different if these constants didn't have the degree of precision that they do. But that's not the only aspect that one should consider when you're looking at the universe as a whole in the context of forever. Uh, the sun has limited hydrogen. The sun is a fusion reactor. Basically, it's this big ball of hot gas, and this gas is so dense and so compacted at the core, so energetic, so hot, this hydrogen gas ball, that the ions are stripped off, the electrons are stripped off the proton, and then the protons, some of them collide and they fuse together because they have so much energy, and then some of the mass is converted into energy, given off as light and heat energy and other forms of energy and radiation. And in the process, the two hydrogen atoms fuse to become a helium atom, and then the helium atoms will fuse together to make lithium, and so on. And this process continues for billions upon billions of years. And as the sun's core, let's say, amalgamate. Well, I guess it's an amalgamation of these elements that are being formed at the core of the sun. The energies that are being given off increase. And so not only is the fuel that fuels the hydrogen fuel that serves as the source for the fusion process depleting in the sun, but also the sun is becoming more energetic. In other words, it's giving off more energy as time progresses, and that means it's getting brighter. And the fine tunists are talking about the position of the Earth being just right for, if it's further out, the world would become frozen. If it was further in, we'd have conditions like Venus. But what they failed to realize is that in about a billion years, the sun's output, energy output, would be such that it will strip away all the oceans from the Earth because the heat energy will evaporate the oceans into space. Can't live without water. They failed to address that issue. Another aspect, and we have a demonstration of that with the planet Mars. Mars at one time had a magnetic field, once had a dense atmosphere, once had oceans that uh, filled the depressions of its surface, and over time, being a smaller planet, the process that produced the magnetic field weakened, and as it weakened, the solar radiation, we call that solar wind, ion particles that are being emitted off the surface of the sun and constantly streaming out into space, stripped away the atmosphere of Mars to a point where life as we know it would not be sustainable. And so Mars became this barren desert without an atmosphere, just a very thin traces of an atmosphere that are left. That will happen to the Earth because the Earth's magnetic field is caused by the molten condition of the core of the Earth. Now, the Earth is larger, substantially larger than Mars, and there is an accumulation of uranium at the core that undergoes natural fission. And the fission produces heat. Produces heat. Uh, this is, well, I'm going to have to call it quits. So, we had a nice little visit with my daughter, and back to it again. Let's see. I think I had left off with the fine tuning argument rebutted. And I guess I had already mentioned about PragerU, um, some kind of a Christian conservative think tank that was put together by Dennis Prager to make all these different arguments about, in favor, I guess, of the Christian agenda, the conservative political agenda. But if God had indeed made the universe, made the solar system, made the earth abideth forever, as the scriptures say, with the intent of indeed lasting forever, um, you just can't ignore certain facts. Again, this is an argument that really pertains, let's say, more relevant to the Jehovah's Witness concept of salvation, of God's ultimate plan for having a human creation occupying a perfect earth forever and ever, and this is the same idea that the Bible students have. I don't know how many other denominations may hold on to a similar concept. I know that most Christian beliefs look at this life, this world, as a way station on the way to becoming angels, or burning forever in hell for the damnation you deserve for not adhering to Christian principles. That's not a very loving God, and I think it does bother even some Christians who advocate the idea, and that they try to rationalize hell as being mainly a alienation from God, and this sort of thing. And then there are those literalists that believe that it's real, and that your soul is tortured forever and ever, time immemorial. The Bible students' concept is, and the Jehovah's Witness concept is, that one who's alienated from God ultimately ends up in a non existent state forever. But for those who accept, adhere to God's, Jehovah's system of things, for lack of better expression, we'll get to enjoy the fruits, literally fruit, forever and ever and ever, every man under his own vine and fig, and there will be absolute bliss. But the problem is that what we understand, and we really do understand quite a bit about the universe now, acknowledge that there's still a long way to go, and that science, let's put it this way, they won't be looking to become plumbers anytime soon, because there are plenty of questions about the universe that'll keep cosmologists and astrophysicists and astronomers busy for a long, long time. But we do have a pretty good handle on things, and if we didn't, we wouldn't be able to enjoy the technology that we enjoy today. For example, GPS. People don't seem to realize that without Einstein's special theory of relativity, we couldn't find our way around using satellites. Because it all depends on timing, timing of signals between the a location on Earth and a position of a satellite. In fact, there are 24 satellites for GPS. The GLONASS system is similarly large, and these there are signals that are emitted by these satellites, and you triangulate between these to get a position on Earth. And that all depends on how long it takes, the timing it takes for the signal to get from the satellite to the instrument, that your GPS instrument. So, believe it or not, because of the protracted period of time and the fact that the satellites are moving 17,000 miles an hour, even though they are uh, much, much slower than relativistic speeds, you'd never notice much of a time difference. That over a protracted period of time, years, um, there would be a difference in the measurement of time, a significant difference in the measurement of time from the satellite to the any measurement on Earth. In fact, the satellite's time would be measured to be slower in relationship to the time on Earth. And it's significant enough that correction has to be made for relativistic effects in order for GPS to give you an accurate position. That is simple truth. The fact that I'm connected to the internet on a computer, and that I have an iPhone, and that I have all these different electronic devices. My car depends on computers and electronic devices to operate optimally. All those devices operate using quantum mechanics, so the theoretical basis for the operation of these solid state chips. These are chips that have literally billions of transistors on them, built into them. These transistors are used as on, off, or one and zero switches that from which individuals can program using binary code, binary mathematics, and you can encode algorithms that way. And so we have computers, and the fact that a computer can carry out a set of instructions extremely fast is what makes them valuable to us, because doing the same number of calculations by hand would take us an inordinate amount of time. So we have this technical revolution that we're living in. We have to give thanks to the theoretical basis for explaining how these things work. And not only do these things give us a practical understanding of how they work, they give us a fundamental outlook, a fundamental perspective of how the universe actually operates, both on the macroscopic scale and the microscopic scale, down at the atomic levels. And so we have Einstein's theory of relativity, both special and general, which deals with cosmological scales, and we have the quantum theory, which has been extremely successful in understanding the operation of particles at the microscopic scale and subatomic particle scale. All these particles operate in the realm of quantum mechanics, and we know that certain things like quantum coupling and other aspects of quantum weirdness actually have been borne out and shown by experiment to have validity, and thus reinforcing the uh, reinforcing the theoretical understanding uh, that quantum mechanics has provided us with in terms of understanding the universe at these two scales. Recently, um, Einstein's general theory of relativity, back as early as 1915, predicted the idea of what they call Schwarzschild singularities, which we know today as black holes. Unfortunately, Schwarz, Karl Schwarzschild uh, was killed at the front during World War One. But Einstein never really bought the idea of a black hole. But Oppenheimer, who seems to be more reputed for his work at Los Alamos in connection with the nuclear weapons development during World War II, he was a theoretical physicist that really promoted the idea of a black hole. And if it wasn't for his persistence and his debating John Archibald Wheeler during the 1950s over the concept, he wouldn't have won over Wheeler eventually, because Oppenheimer lost interest in theoretical physics by the late 1950s, and um, in the interest of, uh, of campaigning against nuclear proliferation, because he was really worried about the outcome of two superpowers having so many nuclear weapons and stockpiling them. But that's a little history lesson. Wheeler carried the torch for black holes. In fact, he actually was the one responsible for naming the Schwarzschild singularity a black hole, and the students under Wheeler at Princeton University, such as Kip Thorne and Kip Thorne's colleagues from other parts of the world, in particular Stephen Hawking from Cambridge. Uh, they promoted and actually further developed the thing, the physical characteristics that you could expect from a black hole, and the radiation that could be emitted from a black hole, and that they do vaporize over time. Um, all of these things that have been postulated by Einstein's general theory of relativity have been substantiated. There haven't been any experiments that were performed that tested Einstein's general theory that haven't borne out that it's an incorrect perspective, as difficult a concept as it may be from a let's say an everyday point of view. But we know that these things we have a good grasp of understanding of the universe, even if it is not intuitive. Let's say an intuitive concept. Um, we can't ignore this. We can't ignore these things. We can't ignore the fact that the sun has limited fuel supply. We can't ignore the fact that the Earth's magnetic field will eventually decline and weaken over time, and thus the Earth's atmosphere will be stripped away by a corresponding increase in the solar wind as the sun's energy output increases. These foretell, these postulate a world that's not permanent. The fact that the universe is expanding, and what we've discovered, and one of the more disturbing things that physicists have discovered with with um, with Einstein, well, with the Hubble telescope, was that the universe is expanding at a rate that wasn't constant, that it was actually accelerating. Excuse me here just for a second if I seem distracted. Um, the universe is not only expanding, but it's accelerating in its expansion, and this is due to a force or an energy that seems to run counter to gravitational attraction. And so cosmologists refer to this as dark energy, because anything that's under an acceleration, there's an energy behind it. We have that. We also have other phenomena that causes us to postulate dark matter, because these clusters, we find that galaxies tend to cluster together and rotate around their common center of gravity, and like super solar systems in a way, except these are galaxy clusters that are circling around a gravitational point, and they're rotating around and orbiting this center of mass that is at a rate that's far greater than their mass would presume that they would. So there's additional mass or gravity that's involved, and so this is termed dark matter. So all of this is a science that just cannot be ignored. And when you think about the idea of forever, um, we end up with a God um, that's like the little Dutch boy that has to plug the leak here in the dike with his finger, and then plug that dike hole with that finger, and then this finger and that finger, and it runs out of fingers. And we have a God that's constantly intervening in the universe and its operation to prevent it from becoming a hostile environment to allow humankind to live forever. I mean, that's the way we would be forced to look at the universe if indeed the ideas and the concepts of the Bible students and the Jehovah's Witnesses were indeed true. So therefore, we don't have an omniscient God. We don't have an omnipotent God. If there was a God that intended for the universe to last forever, we would have a God that would have created protons that were indestructible. Protons being one of the fundamental building blocks of all matter, have a half-life of something like 10 to the 34 years. Yes, that's an unimaginably long period of time, but it's finite. It's not forever. It's not indefinite like the Bible students presume in their theology. The fact that the universe is accelerating in its expansion means that the outer fringes, as far as we can see, we call that the observable universe. We can see galaxies up to about 15 billion light years away, and then we see this cosmic haze. We call it cosmic background radiation, and that's about as early as we can see in the universe's development. Now, as the outer fringes of our universe expand away from us in a spherical way, uh, that we find that space and everything that is within that space is approaching and will at some point in time um, will cross the threshold of the speed of light. And it's not a violation of Einstein's theory because there's nothing that space is not matter. Space time is not matter. And so those things that are embedded within space time, like galaxies and matter that are embedded in space time, if space time is expanding at a rate greater than the speed of light, then that portion of the universe becomes cut off from us. And as time continues to progress, the amount of the universe that is cut off from us increases to the point where it finally narrows itself down to our own the atoms within our own body being cut off from one another. And so that also predicts a finite life to the universe. Just given the fact that we know that the universe is accelerating in such a manner. Um, all of these things together negate the idea of forever. Forever just can't be. God could never have made the universe forever. Again, there's something that he's lacking either the power or there's something in our understanding that's preventing us. Because if God was intending for the universe to last forever for us, for our benefit, as Bible students, as Jehovah's Witnesses presume, then he would have been so wise and so powerful as to make the universe self-sustaining, where he isn't plugging up all the holes that make it such that human life is impossible. The likelihood is that the Bible is just incorrect. And that can be established, well established, not only from reasoning by looking at the proposition of forever, but also looking at Genesis, the first chapter, and every single aspect of the creative days there is incorrect and has been demonstrated by our understanding from scientific inquiry to show and to establish definitively that each and every single creative day is wrong in what it states in terms of the progress of the let's say the progression or evolution of the world and its formation from plant life to when the sun and the moon and the stars were created to when the first animals were created to when man was created, and all of these things can be shown without question that Genesis provides an incorrect sequence of key events in the Earth's formation, and now individuals such as Hugh Ross, who is one of the very few astronomers who is an apologist, a Christian apologist. He postulates the translucent fourth day. I mean, he has to ignore so much to make that argument. He has to defy what earth scientists and geophysicists and astronomers know about the formation of the Earth and over the course of the billions of years. He cannot reconcile Genesis. There's no way he can reconcile it. He uses a lot of hand waving and a lot of technical language. He's basically a scientific charlatan in order to make and assert the claims that he's been asserting. Uh, while he may be an astronomer by education, and he may indeed have his PhD, he also hasn't contributed to science in a meaningful way, in the sense that the only thing that he's really noted for is being a Christian apologist. And that's what he really focuses on. He doesn't spend much time really doing any research uh, from a productive point of view about the universe. He spends most of his time and energy arguing the case for God, and he uses his credentials and arguing his case from authority, that he too is an expert in this area, and that he has just as valid, or if not more so, valid a perspective of how the Earth was created. But arguing from authority is that's a Christian a ploy that Christians use frequently, but it's also a logical fallacy. Um, but anyway, I think my cousin, I gave an earful. I did type out what turned out to be about a 20-page response, arguing many of the points that I have made in this video, and more. And I did argue Genesis in a little bit more detail. The reason I didn't do so in this video is for the sake of time, and because of the fact that I've already made a video that argues point by point from a Genesis perspective of why the Genesis one is incorrect in every respect. Not even with the plants is it correct. I mean, just the type of plants that it says were made, fruit trees, is wrong, because fruit trees did not, flowering plants and fruiting trees did not evolve until around the Jurassic and really mainly the Cretaceous period. And that by that point in time, life had been on the Earth for hundreds of millions of years. And so, if not billions, actually, but complex animal life and dinosaurs, they certainly existed long before fruiting and flowering plants came to exist. So, in every single respect, Genesis 1 is incorrect. So I don't expect to hear from my cousin, but what I do plan to do is, because I did type it up pretty quickly, my paper needs a little bit of refining, but I do think that it's worth posting somewhere and making it available for people to use in case they are confronted by a Jehovah's Witness or a Bible student with arguments that are tailored to counter their thoughts more directly. Like I said, the doctrines of the Bible students and the Jehovah's Witnesses are such that the arguments that are sufficient and can be used against evangelical or mainstream Christianity don't necessarily stand or make much of an impression with Bible students. So anyway, I'm glad to be back. Hopefully, I'll be able to make more videos soon. Um, I've been extraordinarily busy. Life has just really just consumed all of my time, both work-wise and family. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm trying to get the house prepared. We've had contractors in and out uh, to do the repairs that have long been necessary. And then I'm not one of those kinds of guys that is a do-it-yourselfer. I used to be an auto mechanic and I could repair a car left or right, but when it comes, it's just a combination of age, a lack of interest, and really a lack of energy. So, but anyway, I hope that everybody's doing well, and I I wish you all well, and hope to be back soon. So long.